So this is the effectively the main edition, although it's part B, but actually it's effectively the part A with the sound, because the first one we broadcast appeared to have some issues with sound. So let's treat this as A, but it's termed as B because of the actual video is recorded, but the sound wasn't there. So this time, hopefully, the sound is included in this broadcast. So this is the Times newspaper of Friday, the 2nd of April 2021. And what this headline actually shows, remember what we have said about these big charities. We've said that the big charities in Britain, including typified by in the housing sector or housing field, typified by shelter. And in the case of alleged prevention of cruelty to animals, the RSPCA, these are very corrupt outfits, and they're not really accountable, they're not ethical, and they are kind of dud, that is bogus, false platforms, falsifying most of the times and shielding the wrongdoing establishment. And so therefore there is this culture, widespread culture of corruption and criminality being given legitimacy, or the legitimacy is being falsely given, wrongly given to the wrongdoers by the kind of collusion, or the role of collusion played by these so-called charities. Shelter is responsible for denying housing rights and attendant other rights to do with the housing rights denial. And the RSPCA commits crimes against animals as a routine while operating under the cover of being the biggest charity for animal welfare. It is not engaged in actual animal welfare. It is a bureaucracy, totally corrupt and cruel. And it doesn't have at the top of the agenda the welfare of animals. And its cruelty against people who love animals is beyond condemnation and beyond tolerance. So these two are among the biggest charities in Britain that are given de facto impunity. And we said earlier, not necessarily only in the previous part of this broadcast today, that there is no accountability for the police. And there is this culture of brazen impunity given to the police. And as I said, the comments we make about the police is not based on any individual police person, because we don't know any individual police persons currently and have never done in any sustained way. But we go on the observation of the behavior of the police, the role of the police, which is not accountable, which is not subject to accountability. And the Daily Mail's editorial, we shall come back to that one, is in denial, written in denial of that fact. So back to the times and the confession that Oxfam is rocked by new sex claims against aid workers. New refers to the old, the previous claims. The previous claims were concerned about the operation of Oxfam in Haiti. That Haiti operation by Oxfam was actually linked to the Oxfam activities that followed the earthquake in Haiti. And it says that this person, member of parliament called Sarah Champion, who is described as the chairwoman of the Commons International Development Committee, said that the latest allegations strengthen the case for wholly independent regulation of the aid sector. This proves to me the existing safeguarding and oversight mechanisms simply don't work, she said. The committee has urged the establishment of an independent body to look at cases impartially, and this reaffirms that needs to happen. Oxfam has been in the DRC since 1961, that is Democratic Republic of Congo, and employs 273 staff. Its work concentrates on water and sanitation projects among vulnerable communities, and it has helped with the emergency efforts during a series of Ebola outbreaks over the past decade. Allegations about its staff there are detailed in a 10-page letter sent to the charity's leader in Oxford in February. Now, absolutely unbelievable that this Sarah Champion is being quoted and reported in the Times saying that an independent regulation should be established for this aid sector. I mean, this is not the abuse, the sexual abuse by aid workers is not some incidental kind of accidental thing that is happening. It has been happening right from the beginning. And whenever there is a highly resourced foreign kind of intervention in a country like Congo or a country like Haiti, where the people in need of help just happen to be Black or African origin, and the people who are providing the help supposedly just happen to be mainly white people, European people. And this sexual abuse and predatory kind of violations of the rights of the people in need has been taking place right from the start. So they said that the Oxfam has been active in Congo from 1961, and all the evidence would suggest that sexual abuse, exploitation, and rape by aid workers have been going on ever since. I mean, the fact that the United Nations, various staff with United Nations organization have been involved in sexual abuse of people in the countries and communities in need means that nobody nobody is actually free from this charge that they're abusing their position by exploiting and raping and violating the women and children in the countries where they're supposed to be helping. So there is no place to go to, there is no actual independent, rigorous, and ethical source of adjudication and prevention that the victims can turn to. And by definition, the logistics of the relationship between the victims and their violators makes it impossible to seek help, let alone to make rigorous complaints against these violators. So we shall go back to Oxfam sex abuse thing after looking at this one. This one is on page 6 of the Times today, and it's headed or headlined Race Review Chief Compared to Goebbels in Social Media Abuse. The chairman of the government's Race Commission has received online abuse after publishing a report arguing that Britain was not institutionally racist. Tony Sewell, who chaired the review, has been likened on social media to Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda chief, and the Ku Klux Klan. The Times understands that the Commission will write to the Independent Committee on Standards in Public Life with the worst examples of abuse. Amid the backlash against the report, it came to light that Samuel Kasumo, Boris Johnson's most senior black advisor, had resigned. Kasumo told colleagues that he was quitting on Tuesday shortly before the report was published. He is known to have had concerns about the government's approach to race issues and was talked out of quitting in February, but not before a resignation letter was leaked in which he accused the party of choosing to pursue a politics steeped in division. Government press officers have raised an alarm internally about the amount of abuse directed at Sewell. They are concerned. They are considering reporting some of it to the police and directing him to support from the Cabinet Office. Now, this is absolutely Goebbels-like propaganda by Henry Zafman. It's Zafman who is behind the attack on critics of the servile mental slave Tony Sewell. Henry Zafman is like the head of the operation, neo-Nazi type operation that demonized Jeremy Corbyn and attacks anyone who is against racism and against the corruption of the conservatives. So Zafman is the one that can be compared with Goebbels. And we shall look at the opposite kind of view taken by Stephen Lawrence's mom, that opposes that report on Tony Sewell and his role. As I said yesterday, Tony Sewell is the absolute sewer of pro-racist servility. And he was the worst product that the corrupt, apartheid-baked Voice newspaper, so-called, which was launched by the racists in the NUJ in 1981 to counter my activities against racism at the Eastern News. So Tony Sewell was given a regular platform by the Voice in which he said more or less for many years what he has summarized in this servility for Boris Johnson's denial of racism in Britain. So this is the kind of summary by the Guardian's version of Stephen Lawrence's mom denouncing Tony Sewell as saying that this report gives green light for racists. And this is absolutely the least that can be said. And this piece by Rajiv Sayal and Amna Mohdin, this is a distorted spelling of this name, which is not something that we can correct here because whoever gave her that name didn't know the nomenclature and the meanings of name Mohdin. There is no such thing as Mohdin. But we shall let that pass. Doreen Lawrence has described a government-commissioned race report as a green light for racists that threatens to push back the fight against discrimination by 20 years. Now, she is not talking about fight against discrimination. She's talking about the fight against racism. It's not the same thing. So that's the Guardian's version of it, which is diluting the actual words that Doreen Lawrence must have said or written. And her stinging intervention, revealed on a turbulent day for Downing Street, came as leading academics cited in the controversial study by the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities told The Guardian they had not been properly consulted or had seen their work misrepresented. Yesterday, the 258-page report continued to draw fire, particularly for its claims that the term structural racism was too liberally used, and that the factors such as socio-economic background, culture, and religion had a more significant impact on life chances. This drew a withering rebuke from Lady Lawrence, whose teenage son Stephen was murdered by a gang of white thugs in 1993. Speaking to students hours after the report was released, she said, "My son was murdered because of racism, and you cannot forget that. Once you start covering it up, it is giving the green light to racists. You imagine that's what's going to happen come tomorrow. What's going to happen on our streets with our young people? You are giving racists the green light." Yesterday began with the resignation of Samuel Kasumo, number 10 Special Advisor for Civil Society and Communities. The Downing Street insisted Kasumo's decision to quit was made before the report came out on Wednesday. He had previously complained the Tories were pursuing a politics steeped in division. Lawrence, who was speaking during a virtual event organized by De Montfort University in Leicester, said, "When I first heard about the report, my first thought was it has pushed the fight against racism, back 20 years or more. I think if you were to speak to somebody whose employer speaks to them in a certain way, where do you go with that now? If a person is up for promotion and has been denied that, where does he go with that now?" That is to say, that what we are saying, that there is no forum, there is no place that you can go for justice seeking the actual audit. And the Guardian has got nearly 2-page spread on this one against the Servility report by Tony Sewer. And this is something that is going to continue. And the other thing is that they're talking mostly about people of Afro-Caribbean background. There is no mention, or there is no prominence in the Guardian given to people of Asian background. Now, there are more Asian people in this country, and by definition, the more racist attacks are against the Asian people. And there is an issue of the anti-Asian kind of hostility that has been evident among many people who are of African and Caribbean backgrounds. So this is one of the failures. So the Guardian is running a piece by somebody called N.D. Beckett, saying that the Tories have successfully turned the Labour Party shifting to the right. That is their success. And there is a Steve Bell cartoon, very much in the kind of, in the mode of the Labour Party being killed off by Starmer. Steve Bell's cartoon on Starmer is very, very telling, which says, of course, I haven't spoken to him for 5 months, that is to say Corbyn, and Corbyn is shown on the sideline, and Starmer is wearing like a skinhead, like a sub Johnson, tough on Corbyn, tough on the causes of Corbyn. Now that is replacing Tony Blair's slogan, tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. So that is the cartoon by Steve Bell on The Guardian. And it sums up Starmer killing off the Labour Party. What we are doing here is tweeting a question to Laura Pidcock, who was an MP and was listed as a fervent supporter of Jeremy Corbyn. She is not an MP now, but she has tweeted 27 minutes ago that Gypsy, Roma, and traveler people are attacked by government legislation and in trying to live a nomadic way of life under hostile conditions. From boulders being put in their way to visits from the police, community campaigns against them, to leaflets. This racism is sickening and dangerous. Now, this tweet is not very clear, but let's take a sample. And we have asked her the question at 10:39 hours GMT. Do you, Laura Pidcock, know what action the local council has taken to counter each of the attacks you list? You are being asked this as an evidential question to test racism and your personal practice vis-a-vis real-life racism, including in your tweeting behavior. Now, this is something that we shall be elaborating on after allowing reasonable time for Laura Pidcock to deal with this. Now, we said that we'd go back to the Daily Mail, and we are going to take a look at the Daily Mail again. And what the Daily Mail is doing, there is completely predictable piece of racist propaganda by the Daily Mail, which is, first of all, continuing the denial of racism that Boris Johnson has unleashed by Tony Sewer and Munira Mirza, and also attack on anyone who is opposing racism. And the Daily Mail calls it race czar, bites back. He defends his report in Slavery Store, but Boris insists he doesn't agree with all its findings. Now, it calls czar, it's the man who is Tony Sewer. And it is an attack on anyone who is condemning racism and racists. And Tony Sewer is being called a czar and is given this prominence. Now, there is a piece in the Times as well as in the other papers about Tony Blair, who is saying on page 6 of the Daily Mail, I wasn't qualified to be Prime Minister, admits Blair, and I didn't enjoy it. Now, that's a news item, as well as the news that his son, who's got a 10 million pounds on an apprentice kind of thing. And let's have a look at Tony Blair. It's a piece by Daniel Martin, who's a policy editor. Tony Blair has told how he did not enjoy being Prime Minister due to the huge responsibility and his lack of experience. The 67-year-old, who led the country from 1997 to 2007, said it was crazy that the person who moves into number 10 has often not worked in government before. He said that he started the job at his most popular and least capable and ended it a decade later at his least popular and most capable. The comments were made during an interview with BBC Radio 4 for a new program focusing on how the role of Prime Minister has changed over the last 300 years. Mr. Blair said, I don't think I did enjoy the job because the responsibility is so huge. Every day you are making decisions, and every day you are under massive scrutiny, as is your family. So I didn't know if I enjoyed it. The paradox is that you start at your most popular and least capable, and you end up at your least popular and most capable. Since he stepped down from Parliament in 2007, Mr. Blair has made a fortune giving speeches and advising banks. Recently, he has re entered politics, making suggestions on how to deal with the pandemic. The former Labour leader, who was only ever in opposition before his party's 97 landslide election win, compared his experience of becoming Prime Minister to a fan being appointed Manchester manager of Manchester United. And they've got a piece about Emmanuel Macron in France being under attack on his mishandling of the COVID-19. And there is an admission, a reluctant admission by the Mail, and it is also in some other papers in Fleet Street today, saying that Oxford University has allowed rapes of girl students to go without any action being taken against the rapists. So here is the item about one rape. Oxford dismissed rowing girl's rape. Student claims responsible professor who acts as government COVID advisor made trauma worse. Oxford University is embroiled in a rape scandal after a rower claims she was attacked by another student athlete. And the woman says she reported the allegation to scientist Sir John Bell, the government advisor on COVID-19, who sits on the Women's Board Club Executive Committee. But she told the Times he diminished her allegation, saying it's a very toxic combination of alcohol and young athletes at university. Last night, in an email to the Mail, Professor Bell contested the woman's recollection of their conversations. Now, that is Brenda all over again, isn't it? When Meghan Markle told of her trauma and traumatic experience of the royal family, told to Oprah Winfrey, Brenda responded by saying that Brenda, was concerned about the serious allegations. But then she said that recollections vary. That's exactly what this professor is saying about the victim of this rape. She told the Times that the university's handling of her allegation prolonged the trauma and was perhaps worse than the assault. The attack allegedly took place after a night out in Oxford On October 25, the woman said she went back to the campus halls where the man lived and they had sex, which she does not remember. She then went to sleep but claims he woke her up at 5 a.m. to say he wanted to have sex again. In a report to the university, she claimed, I was half asleep and did not give a verbal response to consent. He continued to grope me and then told me to turn over so he could have sex with me. He then has sex with me while I lay on my front. I do not believe I was fully awake, but drifting in and out of consciousness. I do not believe that I was fully aware of what was happening or in a position to resist due to my drunken semi conscious state. I did not give him consent to engage in sexual intercourse and feel deeply affected by him taking advantage of my inebriation. The woman said she later confronted the man about the night and asked him if she had been responsive. He told her she had been somewhat responsive, she claimed. 2 days after the incident, she reported the matter to his coaching team. In his letter, the alleged attacker said, I sincerely apologize for my actions. I feel terrible. It was wrong of me to have crossed that boundary. I am going to read more about consent to make sure I understand it properly. The woman said she sought counseling from the university but was told it would take 7 weeks to arrange. And she filed a report to the university's proctor's office but was told they could not do anything because she had not reported the matter to police. She then contacted Sir John Bell in a Zoom call. He allegedly told her, you give those guys a couple of pints of beer or too much to drink, and they behave unbelievably badly. Jesus, it's a very toxic communication combination of alcohol and young athletes at university. It doesn't work at all. To be honest, this university is not very good on these students' welfare, counseling type issues. Months after the incident, the president of the alleged rapist sports team threatened to resign over the issue when the public outcry over the deaths of Sarah Everard was in the news. The alleged victim said, I had spent 5 months trying to get my voice heard. Then, when the president said the university would look bad in light of Sarah Everard's death, the university suddenly decided to intervene. I felt that his sporting process, the prowess, his sporting prowess was valued above my welfare. It made me feel powerless. A university spokesman said, while we cannot comment on individual cases in detail, we are confident that our disciplinary teams, support services, and sports clubs in all cases will show great empathy and take considerable action to advise and support any student who raises concerns. That is the biggest corrupt kind of sentence written or uttered by anyone. No mention of this person, the victim, this woman who was raped. Professor Bell said last night, the comments in the Times do not reflect the tone of the meeting or how I dealt with her at those meetings. These issues are for the university to manage, and they told us exactly what to do, and we did it. Separate the two parties and encounter her to seek proper investigation by the police. She chose not to do this, and hence no one was able to ascertain who was culpable. A member of the board club present on the Zoom call said Professor Bell's comments had been misrepresented. She added, John was very sensitive and asked how how he could help and asked about her welfare. He did not admonish, and he did not diminish what she was saying at all. The point is that Oxford University has allowed rape. Now it's Oxford and Oxfam in the Times. And we go back to the Oxford item. I'm sure there is a follow-up in this. But before we get there is this item on page 7. No, it's page 5 of the Times. It says that London Metropolitan Police officer accused of raping colleagues avoided suspension. Where do you go? Bat farm bosses charity sitting on donations worth of millions. The charity run by that gambling tycoon Denise Coates has been accused of sitting on millions on donations. So people supposedly being helped by these charities are being robbed by these charities sitting on millions. That is what we said before. Well, we'll come to Michelle Obama in a minute. Remember, Michelle Obama doesn't realize that this school that she has been reportedly contacting again, the school in Tower Hamlets, in the small street called Richard Street off Commercial Road, London E1. She's reportedly contacted them this week, again after first visiting the school 10 years earlier. That is the report. Now that school would not be in that position without my intervention in saving the school 34 years ago. And I'm going to do an update on that. But because let's read the piece in this heading written by Hannah Mays is headed, "Pandemic is a blessing," Obama tells girls. Michelle Obama has told British girls that they should see the pandemic as a great blessing because it is teaching them how to get through something uncomfortable and unpredictable. She spoke for an hour on a video call to present and former students from Elizabeth Garrett Anderson School in Islington and Marlbury School for Girls in Tower Hamlets to mark the publication of the younger reader edition of her memoir, Becoming. The former First Lady discussed the impact of COVID-19 as well as mentorship, sisterhood, motivation, and leadership. She said that the girls should see the pandemic as an opportunity for growth. I would view this as a great blessing to all of you, right? Because right now you are learning how to get through something hard and uncomfortable and unpredictable, she said. And as I have told my girls that that's what life is. No matter how high you get, or how smart you are, or how successful, life will throw you things that you are not necessarily prepared for. And if you know how to get yourself through it, you will succeed. Now, Joe Deb, executive head teacher at EGA, responded, I think to view the pandemic as something that will help us in the future is a really positive way of looking at things. If we just spend our time just blaming everything and making excuses and thinking, well, I don't have to do well at school because there is a pandemic, then we are lost anyway. So I think that's such a great advice. Obama has a lasting relationship with both schools. She writes to her memoir. She writes in her memoir that she first visited EGA in 2009 and has stayed in touch since. In 2011, she took a group of the school's pupils to Oxford University when she gave a talk, and in 2012, she invited 12 EGA pupils to the White House. In 2015, she welcomed Mulberry pupils to White House. She visited EGA again in 2018 when she traveled to the UK for the publication of her book. In Becoming, Obama said of her 2009 visit, I wasn't fully prepared, though, to feel what I did when I set foot inside Elizabeth Garrett Anderson School. They were, they were me as I had once been. All right, so this is not a full text of the Michelle Obama kind of communication. Let's see if there is anything in the Guardian, and we shall see what we can say about the my role in saving the Mulberry School. Now that was 34 years ago, and the Inner London Education Authority, ILEA, which had just been about to be kind of abolished by Margaret Thatcher as part of the abolition of the Greater London Council in 19. So what happened with the Mulberry School was that the Inner London Education Authority in 1987, just in the dying year or years of the authority, had been plotting to scrap the single-sex girls' school constitution of the Mulberry School, which was Tower Hamlets Girls' School or whatever. And it was doing a Trojan kind of way. It was introducing mixed sex composition of the sixth form, which would then be followed by complete mixed sex composition of the school. So it sent a letter to parents, and the school was overwhelmingly attended by Bangladeshi children, mainly Siloti background girls. And there was no sign that a single parent of the girls at that time at the Mulberry School, what is now Mulberry School, were going to do anything. Think about that. They were changing the constitution and the composition of the school, and the parents are not going to do anything. Now that is comparable. That is comparable to what happened in the case of the elected mayor in Tower Hamlets, let's say. When the elements with a corrupt agenda wanted to change the Tower Hamlets Council composition into an elected mayor fronted one, they almost based that plot on the assumption that most of the voters in Tower Hamlets wouldn't know the difference and wouldn't take any action to stop it. And ironically, the elected mayor system went ahead because enough numbers of people who should have voted no didn't vote no. And as I've said before, the reason why the majority of the people voting on the 6th of May 2010, when the so-called referendum took place, didn't vote no, was because the people who were allegedly on the surface campaigning for a no vote lied, as became very clear after the referendum. The misrepresented, missed opportunity referendum result was published. The result was for a yes to the question of having an elected mayor in Tower Hamlets. And what happened? The people who had, on the face of it, allegedly campaigned against the mayor system were secretly plotting for the yes side to win. One of those was Abbasuddin Elias Halal, who was the leader of the Labour group many times in the council. And I asked him many times how serious he was in saying no. And every time he assured me that he was very serious, and I didn't believe him. And my not believing Abbasuddin Elias Halal was vindicated when somebody in the Labour Party, a member of the Labour Party, told me that, brother Haque, you are mistaken, because Abbasuddin is actually campaigning for a yes, while on the outside he's saying no, because he wants to become the mayor of Tower Hamlets. So I didn't see Abbasuddin Elias Halal do the lying. I was told that he was lying. And the person who told me, did tell me that without me asking him about it, or without my knowing that Abbasuddin Halal was doing what this person was saying Abbasuddin Halal was doing. But even if I didn't know at the time, it became very clear that Abbasuddin Halal must have been doing this. Because if the no campaign was genuine, all the other people who were saying no were genuine, then we would have won the no. The no side would have won. And we would have avoided, we meaning the entire community in Tower Hamlets of all backgrounds, would have avoided the scandal and the criminality and the fraud and the deception and the lying and the destruction by the council that became completely corrupt, with Lutfur Rahman being the fronter of the council, wrongly fronting the council as the elected mayor. And the disaster that Lutfur Rahman represented, I'll just find the thing in there, just the list. So this is the 23rd of April 2015. This is April and this is 2015 April. So 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 6 calendar years. And it's the ruling that the Mori published is a meandering read, and whatever the defect in the style, in the content, the Mori ruling has prevailed and has not been set aside or overturned by any appeal by anyone. And this is got, we're going to the end of this. So it's 672nd paragraph. It is under formal conclusions by Mori. Remember what we're talking about. We're talking about the extensive vindication of me, nobody else, because I warned against the mayor system. I was the one, and I still remain the one, because nobody else is doing anything like what I've been doing and saying against the disastrous consequences of having a corrupt post like the elected mayor. So the formal conclusions read as follows. The court, that is the election court, personified by Richard Mori, is satisfied and certifies that in the election for the mayor of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, held on 22nd of May 2014, the first respondent, that is Luthu Raman, was guilty by his agents of corrupt practices, contrary to Section 60 of the 1983 Act, Section 62A of the 1983 Act. The first respondent, Luthu Rahman, was guilty by his agents of illegal practices contrary to Section 13D1 of the 1983 Act, Section 61 1A of the 1983 Act. The first respondent, Luthu Rahman, was personally guilty and guilty by his agents of an illegal practice contrary to Section 106 of the 1983 Act. The first respondent, Luthu Rahman, was guilty by his agents of an illegal practice contrary to Section 111 of the 1983 Act. The first respondent, Luthu Rahman, was personally guilty and guilty by his agents of a corrupt practice contrary to Section 113 of the 1983 Act. The first respondent, Luthu Rahman, was personally guilty and guilty by his agents of a corrupt practice contrary to Section 115 of the 1983 Act. The court is also satisfied, that is paragraph 673, the court is also satisfied to the relevant standard of proof and certifies that in the election for the mayor of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, held on the 22nd of May 2014, there were corrupt and illegal practices for the purpose of promoting or procuring the election of the respondent, Luthu Rahman, at that election. and B, those corrupt or illegal practices so extensively prevailed that they may reasonably be supposed to have affected the result of such election. The court therefore declares the election of Lutfur Rahman as mayor of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets to have been avoided by such corrupt or illegal practices pursuant to Section 1591 of the 1983 Act, and also to have been avoided on the ground of general corruption pursuant to Section 1641A of the 1983 Act. Paragraph 675. It is declared that Mr. Rahman shall be incapable of being elected to fill the vacancy for the office of mayor of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets under Section 1641B of the 1983 Act. Lutfur Rahman is a solicitor of the senior courts, and the election court is obliged by Section 162 of the 1983 Act to bring this judgment to the attention of his professional body, the Solicitors Regulation Authority. It is ordered that a copy of the judgment be sent to the Solicitors Regulation Authority. Paragraph 677. The election court will also report and certify that Mr. Alibor Chaudhry was guilty of a corrupt practice contrary to Section 113 of the 1983 Act, and illegal practices contrary to Section 106 and 111 of the 1983 Act. Now, there are other parts of this conclusion. What I am saying here is that I told everyone concerned that having a elected mayor post applied to Tower Hamlets Council would do this kind of damage. I didn't talk about the section or the petition, but I said it would destroy an already corrupt council and its integrity, and it would damage the community's rights as owed to the community by the council. And I have been vindicated there. Similarly, when in 1987, the then outgoing, let's say, Inner London Education Authority plotted to carry out a religious raid on the Muslim community by introducing boys into the secondary school that was a girls-only school. It was trying to do what had been going on and what I had stopped effectively by maintaining almost daily vigil outside the school, because it was plagued by numerous cases of abortion. Girls from the Mulberry School were being met by adult Bangladeshi boys on their way home from school, and they were going off to having sex, and they were having to be admitted to the Royal London Hospital for hundreds of abortions. That was reported to me by the now deceased medical practitioner who knew many of the families because he was the family doctor, Dr. B.B. Chaudhry, who said that he was called to attend the Royal London Hospital numerous times as part of the certification process of the formalities, whatever, for the many, many, many abortions. So the Inner London Education Authority was introducing a culture, an environment that would have led to multiple hundreds of abortions taking place, and pregnancies, of course. And the quality of teaching and the environment for learning in relation to exams and so on would have been destroyed. So one parent who ran a shop in the New Road, and I was a customer there, showed me the letter that the school had sent to parents. And the letter simply said that this is the proposal and we are asking for your comment. And this parent didn't know what comment they should actually put to the school or how effective that would be, whatever they said. And I told him what I tell anyone who shows me a problem. I say, you do this and this needs to be done. Now that parent was not going to do what needed to be done. But I had to do it. Effectively, it meant that there would be a petition to the Secretary of State against this proposal. Because telling the Inner London Education Authority that this was not acceptable would not have made any difference. Because contrary to the myths, the Labour Party in this country has always been racist and always pursued a policy agenda to sabotage and pervert the original faith and the culture of the people. And I knew that because I had been involved in the ILEA for 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, so up to 5 years. And I was the member, most outspoken, most consistent, and most hardworking member of the most powerful committee of the Inner London Education Authority, the Schools Committee. And I had the most battle with the rest of the committee on every issue. So I knew that the Inner London Education Authority was racistly fronted by Frances Morel, whom I called Frances Immoral, and that she would not listen to the parents of the Marlbury School, and she would go ahead with the Marja plot of the Marlbury School, and that would be the end of the school. So Michelle Obama is, of course, being very clever with the kind of promotion of her younger kind of version of her book. But she needs to know that 50% of the UK venture, that is Marlbury School and the Elizabeth Garrett Anderson, the 50% that is the Marlbury School would not have existed for her if it wasn't for me talking now in 2021, 34 years ago. I gave the best part of the year in making sure that the Inner London Education Authority plot failed and the school survived as a single-sex girls-only school. And the school, after surviving that attack, the school went on the mode of prospering in terms of exam results. And despite my work, I wasn't invited to have a cup of tea with the head teacher after the result, that is to say, the Secretary of State rejecting the ILEA's plot. Just imagine, I spent the best part of a year, my time, my resource, my energy, my skills, and the head teacher, who was absolutely in tears at the beginning, she told me that she couldn't stop the ILEA doing what it was plotting. And I told her that I would stop the ILEA. And this head teacher was so ungrateful she didn't even ask me to have a cup of tea by way of thanks. Who is that teacher? None other than the racist Daphne Gould. The racist criminal Daphne Gould was relaunched 5 years later to attack me on behalf of the Secretary of State, who was a new person, when I started to mobilize for the parent governors at the Stratford School in 1992. And what I said in that campaign has been vindicated, of course. And it will continue to be vindicated because everything I say is truthful, based on the truth, fact-checked, and so on. And when the Stratford School head teacher, Anne Snelling, who smelt of racism, reeked of racism, defied the right of the parent governors to have a say in what she was plotting. And I told her to stop it. She didn't. If she had stopped it, there would be no big row lasting 6 months. But it did, because she didn't listen. So going back to the bad news in Fleet Street today, that is to say, in the Fleet Street papers today, all the bad news is to do with the corruption in the big charities and the Oxford University. Remember, I said the Oxford University is a center of corruption and criminality and criminal denial. I don't have to say it about every single issue, but suffice to say that Oxford is exposed as being corrupt, being sexist, and being complicit with rapists and rapist culture. That is incompatible with any claim about truth and seeking truth, which is what I said. Oxford never represents the truth because it is Oxford or Cambridge. The same thing applies to both of them. So the things that I do and the things that I'm doing here on the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street is the kind of things that I do when I do campaigns on the ground, and I have done campaigns on the ground. The confession that the Oxford University dismissed Rowing girl's rape is not a one-off. It's the tip of the iceberg. And the claim that the Oxbridge kind of connection is a guaranteed way to successful careers and so on is not so much proof that Oxford inherently is a truth-seeking, rigorously fact-checking, enlightening place. It is a proof that the link, the corrupt, sleazy link and networks are persisting over the last few hundred years or the last 100 years, 1,000 years. And that needs to be broken. That is what it shows. And it cannot be broken. It cannot be broken if the opposition is not there. For example, the coverage, the report about the Rawar being raped and her rape being dismissed by the university shows that there is no platform, there is no avenue for seeking justice against rape in the Oxford University, just like there is no forum for seeking justice against racism. And extrapolate this to the diagnosis of the court system and the judicial bureaucracy, which is corrupt to the core. Out of 1,000 cases that deserve to be prosecuted or deserve to be litigated, only one or even less is allowed to go through the process of the court system, which is completely corrupt. So when I said that this is a banana republic, I was being kind, because it's worse than a banana republic. So it's like the American writer who observed about then East Pakistan in the 1950s, when he wrote a book about the country. He said that anyone who believes that there is no God, to those people, who don't believe in God, they go to East Pakistan. And when they go back to their own home, they will change their mind. Because on the material evidence on display, this country shouldn't function. East Pakistan shouldn't function. Because most of the things and most of the people that he encountered or observed, I'm saying him, not me. I didn't say that, but I could agree on many evidence. He said that on the evidence, the country shouldn't function because most of the people and the so-called institutions, whatever, are not reliable and they shouldn't function. And yet, somehow they are functioning. And there is no reason for that. So he says, then there must be a God. That's what the American writer said. Despite all the things that we disagree with the Americans on, this one is absolutely spot on. And I shall find the man who wrote this. It was a man. So in the case of Britain now, it is like East Pakistan in the 1950s. If you look at the evidence of the people that you come across and the institutions of Boris-fronted cabal's government, this country shouldn't function. And yet, it is functioning apparently. That shows there is a God. There must be a God. I am not saying this in any way, shape, or form to give any validation to Justin Welby or whoever is the Archbishop of Canterbury. Because whoever is the Archbishop of Canterbury currently, has committed a major sin. They have told a big lie this past week when they joined the racist anti-Muslims chorus condemning the audacity, in their view, the audacity of the Muslim parents in Batley in West Yorkshire in England to come out and hold a demonstration denouncing the teacher of the Batley Grammar School for that teacher insulting the Muslim community and Muslim children by foisting on the children a Charlie Hebdo cartoon allegedly showing a likeness, in a cartoon likeness, of the Prophet of Islam, peace be on him. Anyone who is supposed to be seriously a scholar or a teacher, and one who is prepared to risk widespread condemnation from the Muslims by doing this kind of thing that this teacher did, must know that 1400 years after the Prophet, there has never been a single photo of the Prophet. So nobody can say what he looked like in visual terms. And to Muslims, having any likeness of the Prophet is anathema to what is acceptable, put it mildly. And no genuine scholar or teacher would want to go and smash that belief or part of the belief in the community, which is what has happened. And it is a very sensitive issue. And so therefore, the Archbishop of Canterbury should never have commented against the Muslim parents, because it makes the Archbishop of Canterbury come across as more idiotic than the teacher himself. The Archbishop doesn't come across as a thinking, thoughtful person who is aware of the key facts about the Islamic faith, let alone the key facts about the Muslim community. Remember, I'm saying Islamic faith and the Muslim community. These are two things. They're related very much so, of course. But you can, if you are a Christian or a non-believer or an atheist or anti-Islamic person, you can express an opinion. But you have to do that in a way that doesn't involve the Muslim community's live feelings. Say, for example, a non-believer can say that I don't believe in God. Now that is their right. I, as a Muslim, I'm an ordinary Muslim, but I am a Muslim, let's say. I wouldn't go and condemn that person for not believing in God. That is up to them, and let them say whatever they say. But as long as they say that by not associating me or any other Muslim with it, fine. But when they associate me or any other Muslim or any other faithful person of any other faith, then it becomes our business as well to deal with what they're saying. Which has happened with this cartoon, both when the Charlie Hebdo kind of originally published it, and then every time somebody else repeated that as a kind of dare, as a dare to the Muslims. That is when it becomes the duty of the Muslims to deal with it. And which is what happened in this case in West Yorkshire, the Batley Grammar School. Because the showing to those children who are Muslim children, the Muslim children concerned, let's say, because there might be other children from other faiths or non-faith groups. When these Muslim children were shown, they went home and they told their families or parents or guardians, whatever they had been shown. They were just doing what children would do. I mean, when they're kind of exposed to something new, things that they didn't understand, they often mention it to their parents. That's what happens with children of any group, faith group or non-faith group. So these children belonging to the Muslim faith families, let's say, told their parents that they had been shown a thing which the teacher said was a picture in a cartoon form of the prophet. Now that is where the teacher involved these parents. If the teacher had not done that, if the teacher had themselves just expressed an opinion about the faith and not done this image of the prophet, then they could have been entitled to say that they were expressing their opinion about something that didn't involve the parents or the community. But here it did. And so the parents, not a large number. Batley in Yorkshire is not a very populated place, even if you include all the people of all backgrounds, faith or no faith. And as the pictures show, because we are only going by photographs that we have seen, it's less than 20 persons turned up, according to the pictures. 20 persons turning up with some placards, standing outside the school, does not constitute a national calamity or catastrophe. And yet this complete, absolute idiot, this exhibit, self-advertising exhibit of a sex object, Ulrika Johnson, has been hired to add her name and notoriety to an attack on the Muslim parents in terms that shows that these parents were threatening the future of society as we know it. I mean, that is the extent. Ulrika Johnson, Carol Moron, any number of so-called celebrities and columnists and all these racists have been mobilized to express opinions condemning the parents. Remember, at the very time, at the very week when the people in Bristol have been protesting against the police. Look at this picture. This is the Guardian. This picture, you can see the police there. Police, yes? And the protesters attacking the vehicle, the police vehicle. And here is the headline in the Guardian, or heading in the Guardian. The police admitting that they regret they were slow to rectify the broken bones claim. What do they mean by the broken bones claim? The broken bones claim is about, as the commander explains, a police commander has accepted that his force was too slow to correct a false claim that two officers had suffered broken bones during clashes with Kill the Bill protesters in Bristol. And the commissioner is photographed here and named as Superintendent Mark Ranakers, Bristol area commander. It's very unfortunate misinformation was provided. It was not done to intentionally mislead. What he's saying is that the police were maligning, intentionally trying to malign the protesters against the extra powers for the police bill. Kill the bill protest. That is, kill that bill. That is proposed legislation. And the police said that two police officers had been smashed by the protesters and their bones broken, which is absolute lie. It didn't happen. Superintendent Mark Ranakers, the Bristol area commander, also said he regretted that demonstrators had been injured during a subsequent night of violence when police with riot shields, dogs, and horses dispersed them. Speaking to The Guardian before a planned fifth protest in the city on Saturday, which may turn into a focal point for National Day of Action against the Police and Criminal Bill going through Parliament. Saturday is tomorrow, that is the 3rd of April 2021. Ranekar said Avon and Somerset Police were committed to working with the organizers to facilitate a peaceful event. After the first protest against the government's police crime sentencing and courts bill on 21st of March outside the Bridewell police station in the city of Bristol, the force said 40 officers had been injured, including two who suffered broken bones. 3 days later, it said that no bones had been broken. So look at this. The police are being caught issuing misinformation and lies and untruths. Now that's not a minor matter. If the police say in a city that two of the numbers had broken bones, broken by protesters against the police bill, then ordinary people would take alarm and take kind of drastic action against protesters instead of siding with the protesters, because the protesters are protesting to uphold the right to protest by everyone. So when police are so free or willing to issue such damaging incitement, actually, by misinformation, incitement of hatred against legitimate protesters, then the ordinary people will be misled, lethally misled at critical times. And the bill, dangerous bill, anti-democratic bill, would get into the statute book. That is to say, it would become law. And what the protesters are doing is highlighting, drawing attention to the very serious risk that liberty, ordinary freedom to protest and say no to oppressive legislation and policing and coercion. That should be stopped. This is what the anti-Muslim commenters and the ignorant and stupid Archbishop of Canterbury has been kind of misled into doing. It's none of the business of the Archbishop of Canterbury to tell Muslim parents what is the right topic for them to object to and protest against. The Archbishop of Canterbury, in that case, has behaved like a stooge of the worst kind and a dishonest one as well. Just like Tony Sewer has behaved like a completely worst kind of stooge for the racist agenda fronted by Boris Johnson, facilitated by Sewer's co-stooge Munira Mirza. So when the mayor of Tar Hamlets, Lutfur Rahman, is derided comprehensively in that ruling by Richard Morey, QC, the licensed law trader barrister who chaired the election commission, that ruled on the 23rd of April. This is the month April. April 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, the 6th calendar years ago. When Richard Morey, remember, this is the campaign. We are campaigning against the elected mayor post. And nobody has discussed Richard Morey's ruling in the last 6 calendar years more than I have done, more than the KhoodeelaarTV campaign has done. In fact, nobody has discussed it at all. Nobody in the community, nobody in the council, not even including the corrupt mayor, John Biggs. And what the Morey report says, as I said before, vindicates me in more elaborate terms than I had listed when in my campaign in 2010, January 2010, saying that having an elected mayor would be calamitous. It would bring catastrophe to the community and it would completely destroy the reputation of the Bangladeshis. Now, according to various kind of reports, Lutfur Rahman has been saying that he did nothing wrong. He's been saying this in the last few weeks, I have been told. If Lutfur Rahman says that he did nothing wrong while he was incumbent in the corrupt post of the elected mayor, then he has to answer. Does he say that Richard Morey's description of him, Lutfur Rahman, as having got in as mayor by corrupt means, does he think it's a declaration of Lutfur Rahman's being correct and right and not having done anything wrong? And the list of 20 or so wrongs that Richard Morey has identified and attached to Lutfur Rahman, does he say that all of those things are statements of praise for him, while in fact the contents are that they're calling him corrupt, dishonest, and so on? Is Lutfur Rahman saying that he's being called corrupt and dishonest, opportunist, selfish, law breaking. Is he saying that all of these things are confirmation that he has not done anything wrong? So the first thing for the people, the voters of Tar Hamlets on the 6th of May, next month, just a month away, is to use their vote and say no. Vote no to the question about the mayor, so that we avoid a repetition of the lies and the corruption and the disgraceful behavior in the name of the community by the elected mayor post holder. That is the general thing. Say no. Vote no to the mayor on the 6th of May in Tower Hamlets. In the section of this diagnosis called Those Who Lied with Lutfur Rahman, the evidence, not prejudice, but the evidence of the based entirely on the behavior, includes all the so-called ethnicity-linked media. I'll explain what I mean by ethnicity-linked media. This is the Financial Times of, I think, yesterday, 1st of April, where this piece about David Cameron, written by Henry Mans, the headline is, or heading is, Politics Morphs from Delusion into Sleaze. This is about David Cameron selling his soul in return for money and telling lies. That is what it is. And although it is that stark, it is still not complete, because it hasn't morphed. The Financial Times is wrong to say that it has morphed only with Cameron being caught lying to the extent that he has been publicly identified as having done, identified in the last week as having done. And it came across this identification of David Cameron's lying and corruption and lobbying has came about quite kind of unconventionally, let's say. It's because of the other corruption that he did. He lobbied, as the Times yesterday said, he lobbied the so-called MBS, Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia. He lobbied this MBS after MBS was known to have murdered or ordered the murder of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi. So David Cameron has no qualms. I mean, today, 2nd of April 2021, Tony Blair is being reported to have told a BBC radio program that he wasn't the right person to become the Prime Minister. And he has likened himself, being Prime Minister, to a fan of the Manchester United Football Club being appointed to manage that football club. So Tony Blair has admitted, too late, of course, because he has done the very serious damage to the millions of people who were genocided and massacred as a result of his abusing the position of the UK Prime Minister to collude with the American President, G.W. Bush. Massacre and genocide and brutalize and cruelly treat and rape and murder any number of people in Afghanistan and in Iraq. It's too late. But the fact that actually stands out in that all of that admission by Bilayar is that being the prime minister is not something that should be mistaken for being suddenly in possession of superior intellectual capacities. He's just another human being. And all proclivities, all weaknesses, all propensities associated with human beings ordinarily out of a post like that of a prime minister come into play. And Cameron, by doing his prostitution, is proving all of that he is absolutely open to being kind of bought and sold, and his soul being taken out of him in return for money. That's what he's doing. But the frightening, chilling implication of all of that is that if he can be doing so many bad, dangerously responsible, cruel things, including the condoning of a murderer or condoning of a controlling mind behind the murder of an investigative campaigning journalist, then imagine how many other people's lives and safety he could have affected adversely while operating in secret or operating under the cover of secret, saying that that secret is necessary for national security. That is why it's chilling. That is why the Financial Times is wrong to give this heading. Politics morphs from delusion to sleaze. It's not sleaze, it's dangerous. Sleaze plus danger to human rights, civil rights, and dangerous to migrants. I'll elaborate on that one. Because this Henry Mann's piece in the Financial Times does not read like a contextually mature piece. He's talking about Henry Mans is talking in this piece about the fact that you can have kind of safeguards against wrongdoing, but no single safeguard can prevent wrongdoing. That's what he's saying. And at one level, that is true. And he is contextually and topically including the recent events. For example, what he's saying about the arrest of the Liverpool mayor, Joe Anderson. I'll come to that in a second. it will be only a matter of time. It is bound to be only a matter of time before the country sees a release from the stranglehold of corruption of the conservatives. But the worrying thing is that although the conservatives will have to be ousted and they will go, this is one picture of Cameron, pictured near the person who ordered the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. So what the chilling prospect for this country is that there is no sign that the removal from power of the conservatives, when it happens, will be followed by the arrival of an overdue democratic, ethical, moral kind of regime. Everything that is visible as being the preference and the kind of interest and the priority of the deadly disaster called Keir Starmer suggests that there will not be a regime, an environment full of democracy and democratic accountability. When I call Jeremy Corbyn intellectually deficient, I don't say that lightly at all. If we look at the last week's tweets by Jeremy Corbyn, he's dead. I mean, when I say that, I mean politically dead. As dead as Keir Starmer. I mean, they're both dead. They're not kind of dead, relatively dead, and one is less dead and the other is more dead. The point is that there are so many things that both Starmer as the so-called leader and Corbyn as the kind of alternative that was vilified out of office could have been commenting on from their own limited perspectives, but they haven't. And my main criticism and condemnation, or in fact, my main evidence on which I said that Jeremy Corbyn was an idiot in office as leader of the opposition. I'm not calling him idiot in terms of his wife, in terms of his sons and whatever. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about his idiocy while he was in post as the leader of the so-called opposition. And it was Corbyn I blame for the extent of the vilification in the media that he received and was inflicted on. I mean, he would sprint from his house to the nearest vehicle. And the sprinting was to do with his wanting to avoid having to speak to the media. Always there were any number of journalists waiting outside his flat or outside his house, and he would sprint. And my point is that instead of sprinting away from them, he should have paused and faced them. And he should have made speeches. And he avoided hundreds. Corbyn avoided hundreds of opportunities to make substantially lengthy speeches to these waiting crews, both broadcasters and reporters from the print media. And my point is that if Corbyn had spoken, and even if most of his speeches were not broadcast, he could have had an archive of references with which to overwhelm his attackers. But he didn't. Now, this week, I haven't seen anything that he has said in support of the parents in Batley, in West Yorkshire. And that has been such an important opportunity which he could have used to articulate all kinds of alternatives to the Tories and also to Keir Starmer. But he's not doing anything. Now, here in the Financial Times of Thursday, the 31st of April 2021, this Henry Mans is talking about sleaze and donation and all the rest of it. But what he is not saying, this Henry Mans, is what I've said Corbyn didn't do. Corbyn didn't actually confront the lying, prejudiced and biased journalists out to destroy him. He should have confronted them right there in front of them, face to face, and they would have stopped doing what they did. Now that's also proof that Corbyn was ill-advised. Whoever was in the team or teams didn't know their brief, which means that most of the Labour Party MPs, well, I don't have to do anything about the Tories because the Tories are from the complete depth of darkness and stupidity and ignorance. So I don't expect enlightenment from them. But for the Labour Party MPs, there should be enlightenment. And the Labour Party should have the moral forward march. I mean, if anything, Tony Blair's confession that he was not suited to become the Prime Minister reinforces my thesis and analysis. The Labour Party MPs, most of the Labour Party MPs are not doing their job. And most of them are not doing their job because they're not fit for the purpose. This is a crisis. This is a crisis that the Financial Times of 1st of April 2021, the piece Politics Morphs from Delusion into Sleaze, is failing to recognize. In my view, any MP worth the description Member of Parliament disqualified themselves if they don't do the job of speaking up, if they don't ask questions, and if they don't report to their constituency openly, truthfully, and ordinarily, not in plastic sentences and plastic formalities. Instead of relying on Starmer to perform the magic of turning the previously Labour supporting constituencies back into Labour supporting constituencies after the disaster of December 2019 that Jeremy Corbyn handed to Boris Johnson. The best way, the only way to turn those constituencies back is to highlight the day-to-day realities of the constituencies, disastrous backward move and the lack of support by the central government and the lack of other facilities that the people in each area need, deserve, and are crying out for but are not getting. Think about what I've said. Rewind and you can see what I've said. Now here, in this piece of politics morphs from delusion into sleaze. What the Financial Times should be saying and what in objective kind of context I'm saying should happen is for all the problems in the constituencies that are still held by Labour Party MPs. All the problems should be brought out in the open and they should be put as motions and subjects of motions to be tabled. And if the kind of committee clerks in the Commons obstruct, if the Speaker obstructs the putting on the motion or table of motions affecting the backwardness, deprivation, poverty, and all the other ills that plague these constituencies, populations, then that should be the combined power to overwhelm the Tories with this evidence. Think about what I'm saying. It's very, very original and very democratic and very powerful and very effective. Instead of saying that he's listing the things that cannot be done, he's saying that there is nothing that can be done. That's what this Henry Mans is saying. And that is what he is said in most of the papers. They're listing the things, but they're not wanting the action against them. And the Times editorial on the latest allegations of sex abuse by Oxfam ends with the idiotic plea. The vast majority of those working for the charity that is Oxfam in Britain and abroad are good people, it says. They deserve a whole lot better than this. And it doesn't say what is the better than this. And here is a Sikh man, Sikh, singing the praise in the Times letter for the Sarval report by Tony Siva and Munira Mirza.